Across America, BP supports more than 275,000 jobs to keep energy flowing. Jobs like expanding capacity for biodiesel in Washington state and reducing operational emissions in the Gulf of Mexico. It's and, not or. See what doing both means for energy nationwide at bp.com/investing in America.
I'm your host, Annie Bowles, and this is News du Jour. Welcome to News du Jour. You may be wondering, why am I, Annie Bowles, here hosting this podcast? I usually start by telling people I'm a political baby. You see, my parents met working on Capitol Hill. By the time I was 2, I had been in my first political commercial and even got lost crawling around the West Wing. Don't worry, Al Gore found me. My family then moved abroad when I was 9, and I attended an international school in Brussels with kids from all over the world. And it is this type of global perspective that I also bring to our show. I graduated from American University in DC after studying political science and art history, as well as interning on both sides of Capitol Hill. I even interned down the hall from where my parents met. I'm now pursuing a professional certificate in journalism at NYU in conjunction with Rolling Stone magazine. I guess I was always that friend in the group who cared deeply about not just what was going on politically, but also globally. I often kept my own friends informed through high school and into young adulthood, so I guess I've always done a version of this show. I'm genuinely passionate about following the news, and I'm here to break it down for you guys every weekday. We always strive to be a calmer space to get your news. Or, as one listener put it, like getting your news from a well-informed bestie. I'm so glad you're here. Hey guys, I hope this week is going better for you than it has been for me. Yesterday was the craziest day. I didn't mention this because I was like brain dead by the end of it, but my son had a snow day and there was like no snow. There was no ice. There was no reason for a snow day. And the public schools were not closed. It was just his particular like daycare. And they are more relaxed because technically they're like a Mother's Day out type of program. Anyway, I had thought he was going back to school right after New Year's, then discovered that he had a whole nother week of break. So I was on the brink already from just that realization. And then for him to go back for one day and then the next day is a snow day, I was like, this stop and start energy has to go. It has to go. I need routine. I need to do my work. I was just really, really craving some like adulthood. Anyway, I love my son so much and he's the true light of my life, but I love my work too. And anyway, I'm glad to be totally focused today on this and diving into some really interesting stuff. So we have been putting it off for quite some time because we've had a lot of really intense news. But after a couple days of more like chill news, I'm going to cover today the timeline of all the events that have happened in the Red Sea and sort of the escalation of things. And then we'll also dive into kind of like why this is relevant and important. But before that, I have 3 mini stories for you guys and one other story to go over. So let's jump in. So for the first mini story, I wanted to let you guys know this is not shocking, but Chris Christie has suspended his presidential campaign. So he's officially dropping out of the race. And we always knew that he was someone who was kind of running just to, further try and derail Donald Trump. He made no qualms about that, but he has officially suspended his campaign. We'll see if he throws his weight behind one of his fellow candidates. I will definitely keep you guys posted on that. So our second mini story for today is actually more of a reminder, but I wanted to remind you guys that tonight, as I'm recording this for you, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis are going head to head in a CNN debate. Simultaneously, though, President Trump will be hosting a town hall on Fox News. I will have both events broken down for you guys on tomorrow's episode. And that's what's great about News du Jour is you don't have to watch these things to be able to understand the major takeaways. However, if you'd like to watch these for yourself, you can always just Google them. There's typically YouTube versions, by the time you're hearing this, it'll be on YouTube, but also the major news outlets will have, video footage of it as well that you can watch. Sometimes it's just good background noise for while you're working. And if you take away a couple, interesting tidbits, then it's beneficial, but I will put that ball in your court. And that brings me to our final mini story for today, which is Nick Saban is retiring. So if you guys know me, if you've been here since day one, I am not really a sports person. Sports are hard for me, but you'd have to be living under a rock to not know that Nick Saban is a legend. According to the New York Times, he had a 17-year run as head football coach at Alabama, and he won 6 national championships while he was there. So obviously he is an icon, a legend, and now he is retiring. So speaking of iconic moves, Hunter Biden crashed his own hearing yesterday, you guys. I really could not believe my eyes. My friend Lauren and I had been at tea, quite literally, we were sipping our tea, and afterward she sent me a DM with, a video clip of this happening. It was like, look at what happened while we were sipping tea. I couldn't believe my eyes. This was shocking to me, and I immediately had to dive into the story. But Hunter Biden pulled a fast one on Congress yesterday and showed up at a congressional hearing about him. He was called a coward and the, quote, epitome of white privilege, end quote, by white Republican congresswomen. So basically what went down here, this, might be confusing on its face. Hunter had been subpoenaed to appear before Congress in a closed-door session that was supposed to take place in December. But he responded in saying that he would only answer questions in a public forum, which one would think would actually benefit the Republicans. They could really grill him and embarrass him and catch him in a lie if they had anything to show for their line of questioning. But they are insisting on having this behind closed doors, which just does feel strange and kind of fishy. But anywho, with the cameras rolling, Hunter showed up with 2 attorneys to kind of call their bluff, if you will. He's like, I'm showing up for questioning right now. He challenged them to question him right then and there. He gave them 30 minutes to begin questioning him, and then he left. And the attorneys did hold some questions for the press outside of the courtroom or the congressional floor. It was super interesting, and definitely I don't want to say it's unprecedented, but I haven't ever heard of anything like this happening. Republicans may still choose to pursue holding Hunter in contempt of court for not showing up to be questioned privately back in December, but this may make their case a bit more tricky because it shows that he is willing to cooperate and willing to answer questions. He just wants to do it in front of the world. Okay, and without further ado, we are going to jump into the timeline of the Red Sea events. So, to be clear, this is not the start of dangerous events in the Red Sea. But I want to basically start from October the 7th with Hamas's attack on Israel, because that's, of course, when the war kicked off. And things really began to heat up at that point, obviously in the Middle East generally, but especially in the Red Sea. So far, since October the 7th, there have been 55 different countries affected by these attacks and 25 attacks by the Houthis in total, some of which have been responded to. So this is according to Reuters, and we're going to walk through all of those details today. But before we jump into the events, I wanted to go over the key players in this conflict and who they are. So I would say the number one key player in this is the Houthi rebels. Obviously, we've talked about them quite a bit on this show, but in case you're new, according to NBC News, the Houthi rebels are a group originating from Yemen's northwest region. They are extremists who practice Shiite Islam. They threaten the government of Yemen, though, and some even think they are more powerful than the government of Yemen. They threaten stability in the region generally, though, and are financially backed by Iran. They are widely considered to be a terrorist group. And then the next key player is obviously Western cargo ships that are floating through the Red Sea. So I think I saw a statistic that it was 12% of global shipping goes through the Suez Canal, which is connected to this area of the Red Sea. And if you've ever heard of the Suez Canal or studied it in school, you know it is a really key, it's really key for global trade. And there's a lot of cargo that floats through there and, again, affects global trade. And then you could say the actual leadership of Yemen might be a key player as well. So they are a separate government from the Houthi rebels, and they and the Houthi rebels do not get along. They're always vying for power over one another. So they are there, but they're not super relevant to this discussion. It's really just the Houthi rebels and then the Western cargo ships that they are attacking. So starting from October 7th to November 17th, things are pretty normal in the Red Sea, although Houthi language was obviously heating up in, how they were communicating to the press. But November 18th, that's when the attacks really began. They said they were only attacking ships that were carrying military support for Israel. But we know that that is just not the case. I mean, maybe it was the case on November the 18th, but at this point, we know they have attacked regular old cargo ships just carrying goods. They have attacked these ships using both missiles and boarding the bigger ships via smaller boats and basically attempting to take them captive. Houthis publicly warned that they would attack U.S. military vessels if they were further targeted, which is just delulu, to put it lightly. This is like a rebel group going up against the U.S. military. So it's one of those things where it's like, they're very outmatched, to put it lightly. And again, it's kind of like delusional thinking on their part that they could take on the U.S. military, but the U.S. is just doing what it can to sort of provide protection for these civilian ships. According to the AP, around December the 31st, then, the U.S. started firing back at the Houthi rebels after they were attacked on a cargo ship in the Red Sea. The U.S. did so via helicopters, and there were 10 Houthi rebel fighters killed in this skirmish. The U.S. then declared at that point that they would be acting in self-defense from there onward if they were attacked by these rebel forces. And to be clear, this timeline doesn't, account for every single little attack that happened, but sort of the broad strokes. And then yesterday, that brings us up to speed. Yesterday was the biggest attack yet, and it was launched by the Houthis. According to Reuters, the U.S. and the UK shot down a total of 21 drones and missiles fired by the group. 2 of the missiles were anti-ship cruise missiles, and one of them was an anti-ship ballistic missile. So these are very serious weapons and very serious attacks on civilian ships. Some of the attacks have been on U.S. military ships, but a lot of them have been on international ships, like Danish shipping companies. And again, as we started out with, there were, let's see, just so I get this correct, there have been 55 different countries affected by these attacks. So this is not like they're just attacking U.S. ships or U.S. military ships or UK military ships. No, they are attacking ships from all over the world just carrying cargo and civilians. Fortunately, these missiles yesterday were intercepted before anyone was hurt. But following yesterday's attacks, Britain announced they are considering further measures to protect the shipping zone and international trade. But we are not sure exactly what they're planning here. No one is. They haven't really announced it. But the Brits literally said, quote, "Watch this space," end quote. So I think this episode is definitely very timely. I actually did not know about the attacks when I started writing this for this episode. So it's something I've been wanting to get to because I knew this pressure was just going to mount. And that is definitely what we're seeing. Biden is now being called upon for further action. People are like, dude, what are you going to be doing about this? Obviously, attacking civilian vessels is against international law. But there is a lot of violation of international law going on right now in the world, and none of it is really being policed. So it is hard to imagine anything being done about it when it comes to the international community, taking action, unless maybe an outright war is provoked and the U.S. is forced into taking military action against this rebel group. We really don't want that. Nobody wants that. But it is just kind of escalating right now. And again, this is something we definitely should keep an eye on. This is not even close to the most important factor here, but I also wanted to touch on different ways that shipping and international trade could be affected by this issue, namely driving up consumer prices. If it becomes more dangerous to ship cargo through the Suez Canal or the Red Sea generally, then shipping companies may have higher costs for protection or to take alternative routes that are much longer. These issues could obviously affect shipping prices, shipping timelines, and the prices of consumer goods. So getting your packages late might be something that would affect us, or just things getting more expensive in general, things that are coming from abroad. So this is just something to factor into this conversation. Obviously it's probably the last thing on our mind when it comes to this overall issue. We're striving for global stability here, but it's just another factor in the conversation that I wanted you guys to be aware of. And that for today is the news du jour. Today, I wanted to leave you guys with the quote: "The exercise of imagination is dangerous to those who profit from the way things are, because it has the power to show that the way things are is not permanent, not universal, and not necessary." If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use to listen. A rate and review on that platform or a shout out on social media would mean the world to us and help us to be able to keep creating the news du jour and reach more people who need a calmer space to consume the news. But the best way to support all of our work is to become a patron at www.patreon.com/sugarfree media, and that is also linked in our show notes. You can follow us on social media at newsdujour.podcast on both Instagram and TikTok. You can follow my personal account at It's Annie Bowles on both platforms as well. Any little noises you may hear in the background are my rescue pup. He has a little separation anxiety and always records with me. We appreciate you listening and look forward to telling you about the news again next time on News du Jour.
Broadcasting from Oklahoma.